A girl marries a fool in place of her sister, only to find out he's a big shot pretending to be dumb. Welcome to Mr. Peter Story's Merry Christmas to everyone. We're so glad you're here to celebrate this magical season with us. During this time of joy and love, we warmly welcome you to a brand new story created just for you. Before we begin, tell us, what's your name? Are you a regular visitor, or is this your first time here? We'd love to get to know you better. Now, get ready to dive into a tale full of emotions, surprises, and unforgettable moments. Thank you for being part of our storytelling community. The autumn breeze whispered through the mahogany-lined halls of the Black family estate. Carrying with it the weight of impending change, Camilla Black stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of her father's study, her manicured fingers tracing invisible patterns on the cold glass. Below, gardeners tended to the renowned rose garden her mother had cultivated over 2 decades, a garden that, like everything else, they might soon lose. "The arrangement is final," her father, Jonathan Black, declared from behind his antique desk. His voice, once commanding and confident, now carried the desperate edge of a man grasping at his last lifeline. "The Sorens have accepted our terms. Their son, Magnus, will marry you next month." Camilla turned, her designer dress rustling with the movement. At 27, she was the epitome of sophisticated beauty, high cheekbones, amber eyes, and a presence that commanded attention in any room. "And you're certain about his condition?" she asked, choosing her words carefully. Her mother, Eleanor, perched on the leather settee, pressed her lips into a thin line. "The rumors appear to be true. Magnus Soren may have inherited his father's fortune, but he's—" She paused, searching for a diplomatic phrase. "Simple-minded. The accident 2 years ago left him changed." The accident. Everyone in their social circle knew of it, the mysterious car crash that had transformed the brilliant heir to Soren Industries into someone barely able to manage basic conversations. Some called it a tragedy. Camilla saw it as an opportunity. "It's perfect," she murmured, more to herself than her parents. "A wealthy husband who won't interfere with my life. The Soren fortune will save our family, and I'll have complete freedom to manage both our interests." Her younger sister, Delilah, sat quietly in the corner, her worn paperback forgotten in her lap. Unlike Camilla's calculated elegance, Delilah possessed a natural grace, her beauty unadorned and honest. "Cammy," she ventured softly, "are you sure about this? Marriage should be about love, not—" "Love?" Camilla's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. "Look around, Delilah. Our family is weeks away from bankruptcy. Father's investments have failed. The creditors are circling, and our name, our legacy, is about to be dragged through the mud. Love won't save us, but this marriage will." Jonathan cleared his throat, fingers drumming anxiously on his desk. "Magnus's condition makes him vulnerable. His father insisted on this arrangement to ensure his son would be cared for, and our family's reputation for integrity made us ideal candidates." The irony wasn't lost on Camilla. The Blacks' sterling reputation had made them perfect marks for unscrupulous business partners, leading to their current predicament. Now, that same reputation would be their salvation. She moved to her father's desk, picking up the thick manila envelope containing the marriage contract. The Sorens had been thorough, provisions for Magnus's care, management of his inheritance, and generous terms for the Black family's financial recovery. All she had to do was say, "I do," to a man who reportedly had the mental capacity of a child. "I'll do it," she declared, her voice firm. "I'll marry Magnus Soren. Our family will be saved, and I'll ensure he's well cared for." The latter was a lie, but a necessary one. Let her parents believe in her noble sacrifice. Delilah watched her sister, noting the calculated gleam in her eyes. She knew Camilla too well, had seen that same expression when her sister manipulated situations to her advantage. But what could she say? Their family was desperate, and Magnus Soren needed a wife who would protect his interests. The days that followed were a whirlwind of preparations. The wedding was to be an intimate affair, befitting the groom's condition, but no expense was spared. Camilla threw herself into the planning with frightening intensity, orchestrating every detail while simultaneously gathering intelligence about her future husband. "He spends most days in his father's library," she told Delilah one evening as they sat in Camilla's luxurious bedroom. "The staff say he stares at books for hours, though he can barely read anymore. It's perfect. He'll be content with his pictures, and I'll have free rein." Delilah hugged a silk pillow to her chest, troubled by her sister's cold calculation. What if there's more to him than people say? What if— "Don't be naive," Camilla cut her off. "I've seen him at social functions. He can barely string 2 sentences together. The great Magnus Soren, who once graduated top of his class from Harvard Business School, now drools on himself at dinner parties. It's sad, really, but it works in our favor." But as the wedding drew closer, something changed in Camilla. Delilah noticed her sister taking longer walks alone, spending hours staring at her phone and making secretive calls. At first, she attributed it to pre-wedding jitters, but there was an edge to Camilla's behavior that spoke of something more. The night before the wedding, Delilah couldn't sleep. She paced the hallways of their family home, her bare feet silent on the plush carpets. A light under Camilla's door drew her attention. Knocking softly, she called out, "Cammy, are you awake?" No answer came. Pushing the door open, Delilah found the room empty. The wedding dress hung pristinely by the window, moonlight casting its shadow across the floor. On the vanity, weighted down by a crystal perfume bottle, was a note in Camilla's elegant handwriting. Delilah's hands trembled as she read the words that would change everything. "I can't do it. I won't chain myself to a fool, no matter how rich. There's someone else. There has been for months. By the time you read this, I'll be far away. I'm sorry for the pain this will cause, but I choose love over duty. Don't try to find me. Camilla." The perfect plan, it seemed, had just shattered into 1,000 glittering pieces, leaving the Black family teetering on the brink of ruin once again. But in that moment, as Delilah stood in her sister's abandoned room, the seeds of a new plan, one born of desperation and duty, began to take root in her mind. Outside, the autumn wind picked up, scattering leaves across the garden like omens of the storm to come. The grand deception was about to begin, though not the one Camilla had so carefully orchestrated. In the silence of that moonlit room, another Black sister would step forward to save her family, unaware that she was walking into a web of deception far more intricate than anyone could have imagined. Chapter 2. A Sister's Sacrifice. Dawn crept across the sky like spilled watercolors, painting the world in shades of grey and pink as Delilah stood before her sister's vanity. Her reflection stared back at her, a ghost in white silk and lace, wearing a dress that had been tailored for another woman's body. The wedding dress, a Vera Wang creation that had cost more than most people's cars, hung slightly loose around her slender frame. Camilla had always been curvier, more statuesque, but it would have to do. "Hold still," Eleanor Black commanded, her usually steady hands trembling as she pinned the dress. Every few seconds, she would pause to dab at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. "We can make this work. We have to make this work." The events of the past 6 hours felt like a fever dream. The discovery of Camilla's note, the family meeting in Jonathan Black's study, where panic had given way to desperate innovation, the frantic calls to the wedding planner, explaining that the bride had fallen ill and her sister would be handling last-minute details. A clever ruse to explain why they needed access to the venue before dawn. "What if someone realizes?" Delilah whispered. watching her mother's reflection in the mirror. The Sorens have met Camilla at social functions. They'll know I'm not her. Jonathan Black emerged from the shadows of the room, his face haggard from a sleepless night. Magnus's condition works in our favor. He barely registers faces anymore. As for the others, he adjusted his tie with fingers that shook. The ceremony will be small, intimate, only family and a handful of close friends. Most haven't seen Camilla in months. She's been preparing for the wedding in seclusion. The lie tasted bitter in Delilah's mouth, but she nodded. What choice did they have? The contracts were signed, the money already partially transferred. If the wedding didn't proceed, their family wouldn't just face social ruin, they'd be legally and financially destroyed. Besides, Eleanor added, securing another pin, you and Camilla share the same features, the same dark skin tone, the same height. Your face is softer, yes, but love makes people see what they want to see. She stepped back, surveying her work. With the right makeup, the right hairstyle, it could work. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of beauty professionals, all sworn to secrecy with generous bonuses. Delilah sat still as they transformed her into her sister's doppelganger. Her natural curls were straightened and styled into Camilla's signature elegant updo. Makeup artists contoured her face, sharpening her soft features to mirror her sister's more angular beauty. By the time they finished, even Jonathan did a double take when he entered the room. But it wasn't just about looking like Camilla. Delilah had to become her. As the makeup artists packed their supplies, Eleanor drilled her daughter on details of Camilla's life, relationships, and preferences. Remember, you spent a semester in Paris during college. You collect vintage Hermès scarves. Your favorite wine is a 1982 Bordeaux. Delilah absorbed it all, though her mind kept wandering to Magnus Soren. She had seen him once, at a charity gala 6 months ago, before agreeing to this deception. He had stood in a corner, watching the crowd with vacant eyes, occasionally smiling at nothing. His father had kept close to him, managing his interactions, steering him away from lengthy conversations. Would she be taking on that role now? The rings, she suddenly remembered, panic rising in her throat. Camilla's engagement ring. Here. Jonathan pulled a velvet box from his pocket. She left it on my desk with the note. At least she gave us that much. The ring slid onto Delilah's finger, slightly loose, but not noticeably so. The 5-carat diamond caught the morning light, throwing prisms across the wall. It felt heavy, like a shackle. At 9:30, the first guests would begin arriving at St. Patrick's Cathedral. By 10, Delilah would walk down the aisle toward a man who thought he was marrying her sister. By noon, she would be Mrs. Magnus Soren, committed to a lifetime of caring for a mentally impaired man while maintaining an elaborate deception. You don't have to do this, Eleanor said softly, catching her daughter's hand. We could confess everything, face the consequences. But Delilah could see the fear in her mother's eyes. The Blacks wouldn't just lose their money and status. They'd face legal repercussions for fraud. The Sorens would ensure they were destroyed, their reputation shredded, their future prospects obliterated. And Camilla would be free to live her life with her secret lover, while their family paid the price for her selfishness. "I'll do it," Delilah repeated, stronger this time. She stood, the dress rustling around her feet. In the full-length mirror, she barely recognized herself. The woman staring back was all Camilla's sophisticated elegance with none of her calculated coldness. It was a mask she would have to wear perfectly. A knock at the door made them all jump. "The car is ready," the butler announced. "The flowers have arrived at the cathedral, and Mr. Soren Sr. called to confirm they're en route." Delilah took a deep breath, smoothing non-existent wrinkles from the dress. In her mind, she began constructing a new identity, a hybrid of herself and Camilla, someone who could believably be the woman Magnus Soren thought he was marrying. "One last thing," Jonathan said, pulling her aside. "The prenuptial agreement, there's a clause about consummation." He couldn't meet her eyes. "The marriage must be valid for the contracts to be binding." The implications hit her like a physical blow. She would have to, with a man who didn't even know who she really was. The ethical implications made her head spin. "I understand," she managed, though her voice shook slightly. "I'll do whatever needs to be done." The drive to the cathedral passed in suspended animation. Through the tinted windows of the Rolls-Royce, Manhattan scrolled past like scenes from someone else's life. Delilah watched couples walking dogs, children chasing pigeons, tourists taking photos, all of them living their normal, honest lives while she headed toward a future built on lies. As the car pulled up to the cathedral's side entrance, Eleanor squeezed her daughter's hand. "Remember, you're doing this for family. Everything we do for family." Delilah nodded, unable to speak. The weight of the veil settled over her face like a shroud as her father helped her from the car. Through the delicate lace, she could see the massive doors of St. Patrick's looming before her. Somewhere beyond them waited Magnus Soren, the man she would pledge her life to under false pretenses. "Ready?" Jonathan asked, offering his arm. Delilah took it, feeling the solid strength of him beneath her fingers. In her mind, she said goodbye to herself, to the quiet girl who loved books and gardening, who dreamed of finding true love someday. That girl would have to die for this deception to live. The organ music began to swell, its notes rolling through the cathedral like waves. As the door swung open, revealing the long aisle ahead, Delilah took her first step, not just toward Magnus Soren, but toward a life of constant performance. She was no longer just Delilah Black. She was now the understudy in the role of a lifetime, playing her sister in a production where the stakes were higher than any theater could imagine. And somewhere, in a place Delilah couldn't know, her sister Camilla was probably raising a glass to her own escape, unaware that her perfect plan had set in motion events that would change all their lives forever. The greatest deception was about to begin, though not the one anyone had anticipated. As Delilah took another step toward her future, she couldn't know that she wasn't the only one wearing a mask in this elaborate charade. Chapter 3. The Fool's Game. The first time Delilah saw Magnus Soren up close, her heart nearly stopped. Standing at the altar, he cut an imposing figure despite his allegedly diminished mental state. 6 feet tall, with shoulders that filled out his bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo perfectly. He had the kind of presence that commanded attention even when silent. His thick, dark hair was expertly styled, and his clean-shaven jaw could have been carved from marble. If this was what simple-minded looked like, Delilah couldn't imagine how devastating he must have been before the accident. As she approached on her father's arm, Magnus's vacant blue eyes settled on her with an unsettling intensity. For a fraction of a second, she could have sworn she saw something flash across his face, recognition, confusion. But it disappeared so quickly, she dismissed it as her own nervous imagination. "Pretty," Magnus said loudly, inappropriate enough to make several guests shift uncomfortably in their seats. His father, Henrik Soren, standing beside him as best man, placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. "Yes, son," Henrik murmured, "your bride is very pretty." The ceremony proceeded like a carefully choreographed dance, each step planned to minimize Magnus's participation. The priest, briefed about the groom's condition, kept his questions simple and direct. Magnus responded with childlike enthusiasm, sometimes too loud, sometimes barely audible, but he didn't miss a single cue. When it came time for the vows, Delilah's hands trembled as she held the paper. She'd memorized Camilla's personally written vows, found tucked into her wedding planner. The words felt like ashes in her mouth, Magnus, I promise to be your guiding star, your constant companion, your faithful wife. Magnus's vows were simplified to basic repeating after the priest, yet something in his delivery made Delilah pause. The vacant look in his eyes seemed to flicker whenever their gazes met, like a television with poor reception, occasionally showing glimpses of a clear picture. "Ring!" Magnus announced abruptly, reaching for the gold band with all the coordination of a toddler. Yet somehow he managed to slide it onto her finger without fumbling. His touch was sure, his grip steady, nothing like the uncoordinated movements he'd displayed moments before. The reception was held in the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, decorated in cream and gold tones that screamed old money and refined taste. Delilah found herself seated beside her new husband, watching him from the corner of her eye as he played with his food, occasionally making loud observations about the decorations or guests that made people wince sympathetically. "Blue butterflies," he declared, pointing at the centerpiece with his fork. "Pretty like your eyes." Then he frowned. "No, not blue. Brown now. Different." Delilah's heart stuttered. Camilla had blue eyes. It was one detail they couldn't change with contact lenses for fear of complications. Magnus had noticed the difference, yet his observation came wrapped in enough confusion and childish delivery that no one else seemed to register its significance. Throughout the afternoon, more moments like this accumulated. Magnus would say something surprisingly insightful, then immediately follow it with obviously foolish behavior. He quoted Shakespeare while spilling soup down his shirt. He correctly identified a rare vintage of wine by smell alone, then proceeded to blow bubbles in it with his straw. Henrik Soren hovered nearby, managing his son's interactions with practiced ease. But occasionally, Delilah caught him watching Magnus with an expression she couldn't quite read. Was it grief, concern, or something else entirely? "Dance," Magnus announced suddenly, standing with enough force to rattle the china. "Want dance with wife?" Before anyone could intervene, he had pulled Delilah to her feet and led her to the dance floor. She expected him to stumble, to need guidance, but instead found herself swept into a perfect waltz hold. His posture was impeccable, his leading subtle but firm. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. He counted loudly, like a child learning to dance, yet his feet moved with fluid grace that spoke of years of training. The dichotomy was jarring. As they turned around the floor, Magnus leaned close to her ear, his breath warm against her skin. "You smell different too," he whispered, his voice losing its childish quality for just a moment. "Camilla wore Chanel No. 5. You prefer something softer." Before Delilah could process this, he pulled back, his face once again a mask of vacant happiness. "Pretty dress goes swoosh," he announced to anyone within earshot, twirling her with excessive enthusiasm. The rest of the reception passed in a blur of congratulations and careful management of Magnus's condition. He alternated between childish outbursts and periods of quiet observation, during which his eyes would follow Delilah with unnerving focus. As evening fell and the last guests departed, Henrik pulled Delilah aside. "Magnus's routine is very important," he explained, handing her a leather-bound notebook. "Everything is detailed here, his medications, his preferred schedule, his triggers. The staff at your new home have been fully briefed, but as his wife, you'll need to take an active role in his care." Delilah nodded, clutching the notebook like a lifeline. "I understand. I'll take good care of him." Henrik's grip on her arm tightened slightly. "See that you do. The Sorens protect their own, and Magnus, despite his condition, is very precious to us." Was there a warning in his tone? Before Delilah could analyze it, Magnus appeared beside them, tugging at his bow tie with evident distress. "Home now," he insisted. "Tired. Want go home." The Soren family townhouse on the Upper East Side would be their home for the foreseeable future. As the car pulled up to the magnificent limestone facade, Delilah felt her anxiety spike. This was it. No more family around, no more guests to maintain appearances for. Just her and Magnus, alone. The staff had already retired for the night, leaving only the security team monitoring the premises from their discreet posts. Magnus led the way inside, his movements suddenly more purposeful than they'd been all day. In the massive marble foyer, he stopped abruptly. Delilah nearly collided with his back. Slowly, he turned to face her, and what she saw made her blood freeze in her veins. The vacant expression was gone. In its place was something sharp, calculating, and unmistakably intelligent. His posture had changed too. Gone was the slightly stooped, uncertain stance of a damaged man. He stood straight, commanding, every inch the Harvard-educated businessman he'd once been. "Well," he said, his voice rich and cultured, nothing like the childish tones he'd affected all day. "Shall we drop the pretense, Mrs. Soren? Or should I say, Delilah?" The world tilted sideways as Delilah realized the magnitude of her situation. She wasn't the only one who'd been playing a role. The greatest fool in this game hadn't been Magnus Soren. It had been her, for believing the performance in the first place. As she stood there, wedding dress heavy around her legs, Delilah understood that she'd walked into something far more complex than a simple marriage of convenience. The question was, had she just stumbled into a trap, or was this the beginning of something else entirely? Magnus's blue eyes glittered with intelligence as he waited for her response, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The game was about to change, and Delilah had the sinking feeling she'd been playing by the wrong rules all along. Chapter 4. Whispers and Wonderings. The silence in the foyer stretched between them like a living thing, broken only by the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Delilah's mind raced, trying to process the transformation before her. Gone was any trace of the simpleton she'd agreed to marry. In his place stood Magnus Soren as he truly was, sharp, commanding, and undeniably dangerous. "Would you like a drink?" he asked, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "I believe we both could use one for this conversation." Without waiting for her response, he strode to a hidden panel in the wood-paneled wall, pressing it to reveal a fully stocked bar. Delilah watched him pour 2 glasses of amber liquid, his movements precise and elegant. Every gesture screamed of privilege and power, of a man completely in control of his environment. How had anyone ever believed him incompetent? "Why?" The question escaped her before she could stop it, her voice barely above a whisper. Magnus turned, offering her one of the crystal tumblers. Why the deception? Or why reveal it now? His lips curved in a sardonic smile. "Please, sit. This may take a while." He gestured to the formal living room, an imposing space dominated by antique furniture and priceless art. Delilah sank into a leather armchair, her wedding dress pooling around her like foam on dark water. She took a sip of the whiskey, grateful for the burning warmth it provided. "The accident 2 years ago was real," Magnus began, settling into the chair opposite her. "A head-on collision on a rainy night. The other driver was drunk, crossed the median. I spent 3 months in a private hospital in Switzerland." He swirled the liquid in his glass, watching the light play through it. "When I emerged, everyone expected me to be damaged, broken. Their pity was illuminating." He stood, moving to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the garden. "Do you know what happens to a man of my position when people think he's mentally incompetent? They reveal themselves. Competitors become careless, thinking me no threat. Allies show their true colors, believing I can't understand their machinations. Even my own board members began plotting, thinking I wouldn't notice." "So you played into their expectations," Delilah realized, the pieces falling into place. Magnus turned back to her, his blue eyes intense. Precisely. The fool sees everything because no one thinks to hide from him. But that's not why we're here, is it? Let's talk about you, Delilah, and your own little deception. Heat flooded her cheeks. How long have you known? That you weren't Camilla, from the moment you walked into the cathedral. He moved closer, looking down at her with an unreadable expression. Your sister and I had met several times during the arrangement of this marriage. She wore her ambition like perfume, strong, obvious, and ultimately cheap. You... He reached out, brushing a loose curl from her face. You wear your sacrifice like a crown. Delilah jerked away from his touch, standing abruptly. If you knew, why did you go through with it? Because you intrigued me. Magnus's admission was blunt. I watched you during the ceremony, saw how you handled yourself at the reception. You were playing a role, yes, but not for personal gain. You were willing to tie yourself to a man you believed mentally impaired, all to save your family. He stepped closer, invading her space. That kind of loyalty is rare in our world, Delilah, and valuable. What do you want? She asked, hating how her voice trembled slightly. Magnus's laugh was low and rich. Want? I want exactly what I have, a wife who understands the value of appearances, who can play her role perfectly in public while being a true partner in private. The question is, what do you want? Delilah's mind spun with possibilities. The marriage contract, the prenuptial agreement, her family's financial salvation. Was it all still valid? As if reading her thoughts, Magnus continued. Your family's arrangement with mine stands. The money has been transferred, the debts paid. Consider it payment for services rendered. You've already proved invaluable in maintaining my carefully constructed facade. Relief flooded through her, quickly followed by anger. So, I'm just another pawn in your game? Another piece to manipulate? Magnus caught her arm as she tried to push past him, his grip firm but not painful. No, he said softly, his face inches from hers. You're my queen on this chessboard, Delilah, the most powerful piece in play if you choose to be. The heat of his hand seemed to burn through the delicate lace of her sleeve. This close, she could see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes, smell the subtle notes of his cologne. He was overwhelming in his intensity, nothing like the vacant man she'd expected to marry. And if I refuse to play? She challenged, lifting her chin. His smile was both admiring and predatory. You won't. You're too intelligent for that. Think of what we could accomplish together. You with your natural ability to make people trust you, me with my resources and connections. We could be extraordinary. Or we could destroy each other, Delilah countered. There's always that risk. Magnus released her arm, stepping back slightly. But isn't that what makes it interesting? A clock chimed somewhere in the house, reminding them of the late hour. Delilah suddenly felt the weight of the day pressing down on her. The rushed wedding preparations, the ceremony, the reception, and now this revelation. Her legs trembled slightly. Magnus noticed, of course. He noticed everything. You're exhausted, he stated. We can continue this discussion tomorrow. Your suite is up the stairs, first door on the right. I've had your things moved there. My suite? Delilah asked, confused. But the prenuptial agreement, the consummation clause. His expression darkened slightly. I may be manipulative, Delilah, but I'm not a monster. We have time to figure out what this marriage will be. For now, rest. Process what you've learned. Tomorrow we can begin planning our future. As Delilah climbed the sweeping staircase, her wedding dress rustling with each step, she felt Magnus's eyes following her. At the top she paused, looking back down at him. One last question, she said. Does anyone else know about the real you? Magnus's smile was enigmatic. My father knows, of course. It was his idea initially, as for others. He shrugged elegantly. That's something you'll have to discover for yourself. Good night, Mrs. Soren. In her suite, a stunning space decorated in shades of cream and gold, Delilah finally allowed herself to break down. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she struggled out of the wedding dress, replacing it with a silk nightgown she found laid out for her. She had entered this marriage believing she would be caring for a damaged man, sacrificing her future for her family's salvation. Instead, she found herself married to one of the most dangerous men in New York's high society, a master manipulator who had turned his own apparent weakness into a weapon. As she lay in the enormous four-poster bed, staring at the intricate ceiling medallion above, Delilah wondered if she had traded one prison for another. But a small voice in her mind whispered that perhaps, just perhaps, she had found something else entirely, a chance to be more than she'd ever imagined if she was brave enough to take it. In the darkness of her new home, Delilah Black Soren began to plan. If Magnus wanted a queen on his chessboard, she would have to learn to play the game better than anyone expected. After all, she wasn't the only one who had underestimated her opponent today. Chapter 5. Behind Closed Doors. The morning after her wedding dawned with surreal clarity. Delilah woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the distant sounds of Manhattan coming to life. For a moment, she lay still, hoping it had all been a dream. But the unfamiliar weight of the wedding ring on her finger confirmed reality. She was Mrs. Magnus Soren, wife to a man who was either the most brilliant actor in New York or the most dangerous. A soft knock at the door preceded the entrance of an elegantly dressed woman in her 50s. "Good morning, Mrs. Soren. I'm Mrs. Reynolds, the housekeeper. Mr. Soren asked me to assist you in acclimating to the household." Delilah sat up, clutching the silk sheets to her chest. "What time is it?" "Just past 8, ma'am. Mr. Soren has already left for the office. He maintains appearances by working from home most days, but board meetings require his presence." Mrs. Reynolds moved to the walk-in closet, emerging with a carefully coordinated outfit. "He's arranged for a car to take you shopping today. Your sister's clothes won't do for the role you need to play." The mention of Camilla sent a sharp pain through Delilah's heart. Had her sister realized yet that her escape hadn't destroyed their family as planned? Did she know about the deception? After a breakfast served in the private morning room, an elegant space overlooking the garden, Delilah found herself whisked away in a sleek black Mercedes. The driver, a stone-faced man named Harrison, seemed to know exactly where to go. Their first stop was Bergdorf Goodman, where a personal shopper named Vivian was already waiting. "Mr. Soren was very specific about the image we're crafting," she explained, leading Delilah through the designer collections. "The wife of a mentally challenged millionaire needs to project both sophistication and approachability. People should see you as devoted, capable, but not calculating." The irony wasn't lost on Delilah as she tried on outfit after outfit. Everything was selected to enhance the illusion. Elegant, but not flashy. Expensive, but not ostentatious. By early afternoon, she had an entirely new wardrobe that would make her transformation from Delilah Black to Mrs. Magnus Soren complete. "Your husband's card, Mrs. Soren," Harrison said when she tried to pay, producing a black American Express with her new name on it. The casual display of trust, or perhaps test, wasn't lost on her. Returning home, Delilah found Magnus in his study, hunched over a tablet and muttering to himself. The transformation was remarkable. Gone was the commanding presence from last night, replaced by the confused air everyone expected to see. "Pretty wife back," he announced loudly as she entered, but his eyes were sharp and alert. A security camera in the corner blinked steadily, reminding her they were always being watched. "Yes, dear," she replied, falling into the role seamlessly. I bought some new clothes today. Would you like to see them? Magnus made a show of clapping his hands enthusiastically, but as she moved closer, he pressed something into her palm. A smartphone, different from the one she'd been using. When she glanced at him questioningly, he merely continued his performance of childish excitement over her shopping bags. Later, alone in her suite, she examined the phone. It opened to a secure messaging app with a single conversation thread. Magnus, this line is encrypted. We can speak freely here when we can't in person. The house is watched constantly, not just by our security, but by others who are very interested in my condition. Delilah stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, Delilah, others. Who? Magnus. Board members. Competitors. Your sister's mysterious lover. Everyone who stands to gain from my apparent incompetence. The mention of Camilla's lover caught her attention. Delilah, you know who she ran away with? Magnus, I know everything about your sister's plan. Did you think it was coincidence that she fell in love with someone right before our wedding? That she chose to run at exactly the right moment to cause maximum chaos? The implications made her head spin. Delilah, you orchestrated her leaving. Magnus, I merely created the opportunity. She did the rest herself. Your sister's ambition made her predictable. I needed a wife I could trust, not one who would try to take advantage of my condition. Delilah. So you manipulated events to drive her away, knowing I would step in? Magnus. I calculated the probabilities. You were the most likely to take her place out of family loyalty. What I didn't anticipate was how perfectly suited you would be for the role. The conversation was interrupted by a knock at her door. Mrs. Reynolds entered with a garment bag. Mr. Soren's father will be joining you for dinner, Mrs. Soren. Your husband suggested you might want to wear this. Inside the bag was a stunning Valentino dress in deep burgundy, elegant but not overpowering, perfect for a family dinner. The choice sent a clear message. Magnus was directing every aspect of their performance. Dinner proved to be another masterclass in deception. Magnus played his role of cherished invalid son perfectly, while Henrik Soren watched both of them with calculating eyes. Delilah found herself navigating a complex dance of caring wife and dutiful daughter-in-law, all while trying to read the subtext flowing beneath every interaction. You're adapting well, Henrik observed as Magnus excused himself to use the bathroom, a convenient moment arranged, no doubt, for this very conversation. Thank you, Delilah replied carefully. Magnus makes it easy to care for him. Henrik's smile didn't reach his eyes. Yes, my son has always had that effect on people. They see what they expect to see. Tell me, what do you see when you look at him? It was a test, carefully crafted and potentially dangerous. Delilah met his gaze steadily. I see a man who needs me, she answered truthfully, letting him interpret that need however he chose. Good answer, Henrik approved, just as Magnus returned, his tie slightly askew in a perfect display of childish clumsiness. Later that night, as Delilah prepared for bed, her phone buzzed. Magnus, you handled my father well. He's convinced you're exactly what we need. Delilah, and what exactly do you need, Magnus? Magnus, a partner who understands that sometimes the greatest power lies in being underestimated, someone who can play the game without losing themselves in it. Someone like you. She stared at the message for a long time before responding. Delilah, and what do I get out of this partnership? Magnus, everything. Power, security, freedom to be who you truly are behind closed doors, and something neither of us expected. Someone who understands what it means to wear a mask. The offer was tempting, but Delilah wasn't ready to fully trust him yet. Delilah, how do I know this isn't just another manipulation? Magnus, you don't. That's what makes it interesting. Good night, Mrs. Soren. Tomorrow we begin your real education in how to navigate our world. Delilah set the phone aside, moving to the window to look out over the city lights. She had entered this marriage expecting to care for a damaged man, only to find herself apprenticed to a master of manipulation. The question was, could she learn to play this game without losing her soul in the process? As if in answer to her thoughts, a final message buzzed through. Magnus, remember, in chess, the queen starts beside the king but moves freely on her own. Your power lies in choosing how to use that freedom. Delilah smiled despite herself. Perhaps this strange marriage wasn't a prison after all, but a door to possibilities she'd never imagined. The game was just beginning, and she intended to learn every rule. Chapter 6. The Truth Unravels. The first month of marriage to Magnus Soren was like attending an elite masterclass in deception. Every morning brought new lessons, each interaction carefully orchestrated to deepen their elaborate charade, while simultaneously teaching Delilah the true nature of power in their world. "Watch their eyes," Magnus instructed one evening as they sat in his private study reviewing security footage from that day's board meeting. On the screen, various Soren Industries executives sat around a massive conference table, their attention fixed on Magnus as he played with a rubber band and mumbled about pretty colors. "See how Harrison looks at Mitchell when I mention the Asian markets? That's because they're planning a hostile takeover of our subsidiary in Singapore." Delilah leaned closer to the screen, studying the subtle interplay of glances and gestures. "How long have you known?" 3 months. Magnus's smile was predatory. "I've been feeding them false information through various channels, letting them think they're clever." He fast-forwarded to another segment. "Watch Mitchell's left hand when I start talking about numbers. The way he taps his fingers. He's nervous. He should be. Tomorrow, they'll discover that their secret negotiations have been with a shell company I control." The lesson was clear. In their world, everything was a sign if you knew how to read it. Delilah found herself becoming hyper-aware of the subtle languages of power, the way a handshake could convey threats, how the placement of people at a dinner table spoke volumes about allegiances and betrayals. Their public appearances were carefully choreographed performances. Magnus would play the cheerful invalid, while Delilah managed him with gentle competence, earning sympathetic smiles and admiring whispers about her dedication. But beneath every interaction lay layers of calculation and observation. "The key," Magnus explained during one of their encrypted conversations, "is to let people think they're cleverer than you. Everyone wants to believe they're the smartest person in the room. Give them that illusion, and they'll tell you everything while thinking they're manipulating you." Delilah proved to be an apt pupil. Her natural empathy, once considered a weakness in their cutthroat world, became her greatest asset. People opened up to her, confiding their secrets to the kind, patient woman who seemed so devoted to her challenged husband. Each confession, each confidential whisper became another piece in the complex puzzle Magnus was assembling. Their relationship, too, evolved in unexpected ways. The initial tension of their arranged marriage gave way to something more complex, a partnership built on mutual respect and a shared appreciation for the game they were playing. During their private moments, away from the cameras and prying eyes, they found themselves engaging in increasingly personal conversations. "Why did you really choose this path?" Delilah asked one night as they sat in the garden under the stars. It was the one place they could speak freely after Magnus's security team swept for surveillance devices. Magnus was silent for a long moment, swirling the whiskey in his crystal tumbler. "The accident changed everything," he finally said. 3 months in that Swiss hospital, watching visitors come and go, hearing them discuss my company's future as if I wasn't there. It was enlightening. People reveal their true selves when they think you can't understand them. But to maintain this deception for so long, it became something more than just a strategic choice, he admitted. "It's liberating in a way. When everyone thinks you're simple, they don't guard themselves. Every betrayal, every scheme, every hidden agenda becomes visible. It's like having X-ray vision into the human soul. Delilah studied his profile in the moonlight. And what does your X-ray vision show you about me? His blue eyes met hers with unexpected intensity. You're the first person who surprised me in years. I thought I knew exactly what would happen when your sister ran, how you would react, how this marriage would play out, but you've exceeded every calculation. Is that a good thing? It's refreshing. He reached out, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. The gesture was startlingly intimate, causing her breath to catch. You play the game beautifully, but you haven't let it change who you are. That's rare in our world. Their moment was interrupted by a buzz from Magnus's secure phone. His expression darkened as he read the message. It seems we have a problem. Your sister has resurfaced. Delilah's heart skipped a beat. Where? Monte Carlo. She's been spotted with James Mitchell. Yes, the same Mitchell from my board. It appears their chance meeting 6 months ago wasn't so coincidental after all. The pieces clicked into place. She was working with him all along. Her running away was part of their plan. Magnus nodded grimly. They thought her disappearance would throw our family into chaos, making it easier for Mitchell's faction to take control while I was distracted by my new bride's betrayal. What they didn't count on was you. Or you, Delilah added. They still think you're incapable of understanding their scheme. Exactly. Magnus's smile was sharp. And now they're about to learn the cost of underestimating both of us. Tomorrow Mitchell will receive some very interesting photos of his meetings with certain Chinese investors, meetings that technically violate several international trade agreements. And Camilla, that depends on you. Magnus turned to face her fully. She's your sister. How do you want to handle her betrayal? It was a test, Delilah realized, not just of her loyalty, but of her understanding of the game they were playing. She thought carefully before responding. We let her and think she's winning, she said slowly. Feed her information that makes her believe her plan is working. Then when she and Mitchell make their move, we spring the trap, Magnus finished, approval clear in his voice. See? This is why you're perfect for this role. You understand the long game. Later that night, alone in her suite, Delilah received another encrypted message. Magnus, you could have asked for revenge against your sister. Most would have. Delilah, revenge is emotional. This is business. Magnus, you're learning. But tell me truthfully, doesn't part of you want to make her pay for her betrayal? Delilah hesitated before responding. Delilah, of course it does. She left me to clean up her mess, never thinking about the consequences, but letting those feelings drive my decisions would be amateur. Magnus, you really are extraordinary, you know. I find myself increasingly grateful for your sister's selfishness. It brought me something far more valuable than I expected. The message made her heart race in a way she wasn't entirely comfortable examining. Their relationship was built on mutual advantage and shared secrets. Anything more would be dangerous. And yet, Delilah, are we still playing the game, Magnus? Or is this something else? His response took several minutes to arrive. Magnus, perhaps it's both. The best partnerships blur the lines between strategy and sincerity. The question is, are you ready to explore that ambiguity? She stared at the message, understanding its implications. They were standing on the edge of something deeper than their carefully constructed facade. The smart move would be to maintain professional distance to keep their relationship strictly strategic. Instead, she typed, Delilah, I'm learning that the most interesting moves in chess are often the unexpected ones. His reply was immediate. Magnus, then let's write our own rules. Dinner tomorrow, just us. No cameras, no performance. We'll see what's real behind the masks. As Delilah set the phone aside, she caught her reflection in the window, a woman transformed from the naive sister who'd stepped into Camilla's place. The game had changed her, but perhaps not in the ways anyone had anticipated. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Mitchell's schemes, Camilla's machinations, the constant performance their lives required. But for now, she allowed herself to feel a flutter of anticipation about dinner with Magnus. A dinner where, for the first time, they would both leave their masks at the door. In a world built on deception, the prospect of genuine connection was perhaps the most dangerous game of all. Chapter 7. A Dangerous Dance. The private dining room of the Soren townhouse had been transformed. Gone were the usual formal place settings and hovering staff. Instead, soft candlelight flickered across a more intimate arrangement. Two places set close together, bottles of wine breathing nearby, and most notably, no security cameras in sight. Delilah stood in the doorway, taking in the scene. She had dressed carefully for this dinner, choosing a simple black cocktail dress that was wholly her own style, not the carefully curated image of Mrs. Magnus Soren. Her natural curls were loose around her shoulders, and she wore minimal jewelry, just her wedding ring and a pair of small diamond studs. "The cameras are off in this entire wing," Magnus's voice came from behind her. "I had the security team do a sweep for any unauthorized surveillance devices. Tonight, we're truly alone." She turned to face him, and her breath caught slightly. Without his usual vacant expression, Magnus was devastating. His sharp features were animated with intelligence, his blue eyes intense as they took her in. He'd shed his public persona's rumpled appearance for a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, no tie, the top buttons of his white shirt casually undone. "No masks?" she asked, voice slightly unsteady. "No masks?" He stepped closer, offering her a glass of wine. "Tonight, we're just Magnus and Delilah. No performance, no strategy, no game." "Is that possible?" She accepted the glass, their fingers brushing. "After everything?" His smile was surprisingly gentle. "Let's find out." Dinner was served by Mrs. Reynolds, the only staff member Magnus trusted completely, he explained after she'd left them alone. The food was excellent, but what struck Delilah most was how different Magnus was when fully himself. His conversation was brilliant, ranging from art to philosophy to business with equal passion. He had a dry wit that made her laugh genuinely, and his observations about human nature were fascinating. "Tell me about yourself," he requested as they moved to the comfortable seating area with their wine. The real Delilah, not the carefully constructed Mrs. Soren. She curled into the corner of the sofa, considering. "What do you want to know?" "Everything." He sat beside her, turned to face her fully. "I know your file, your background, your family history, but I want to know you. What makes you laugh? What keeps you up at night? What did you dream of before life threw you into this elaborate charade?" The intensity of his interest was both flattering and unnerving. "I wanted to be a writer," she admitted. "I used to fill notebooks with stories, poems, observations about life. Camilla always thought it was a waste of time. And now? Now I feel like I'm living in one of my stories." She took a sip of wine. "The plot twists are certainly dramatic enough." Magnus laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "Life does have a way of exceeding fiction, though I doubt any publisher would believe this particular tale. A brilliant businessman pretending to be simple-minded to protect his empire, who ends up married to his intended bride's sister. It does stretch credibility. Don't forget the part where the substitute bride turns out to be more perfect for the role than anyone could have anticipated." His voice dropped lower, more intimate. "Where she proves to be not just capable, but extraordinary." Heat bloomed in Delilah's cheeks. "Magnus, you must know how remarkable you are." he continued, setting his wineglass aside. "I chose you because I thought you would be malleable, easy to control. Instead, you've become essential, not just to the plan, but—" He trailed off, and for the first time since she'd known him, Magnus Soren seemed uncertain. "But—" she prompted softly. Instead of answering, he reached out, tracing his fingers along her jaw. The touch was electric, sending shivers down her spine. "I find myself thinking about you at the most inopportune moments," he confessed. "During board meetings, in the middle of negotiations, even when I'm playing my fool's role. I'll catch a glimpse of your smile, your real smile, not the careful one you wear in public, and forget my lines." Delilah's heart raced. "That sounds dangerous." "It is." His thumb brushed her lower lip. "You're dangerous, Delilah. You make me want things I can't afford to want." "What things?" she whispered. "Authenticity, connection, the freedom to be myself with someone who sees all of me, not just the masks I wear." He leaned closer, his breath warm against her skin. "The right to do this." The kiss was gentle at first, a question more than a demand. Delilah responded without thinking, her free hand sliding up to curl around his neck. Magnus made a low sound in his throat, deepening the kiss as he took her wineglass and set it aside. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, reality came crashing back in. "This complicates everything," Delilah said, though she didn't move from his embrace. "Everything worth having is complicated." Magnus brushed a curl from her face. "The question is, are you willing to risk it?" She studied him in the candlelight, this man who had already turned her world upside down once. "How do I know this isn't just another layer of the game? Because for the first time in years, I'm terrified." His admission was raw, honest. "I've built my entire empire on being in control, on never letting anyone close enough to matter. You make me want to risk that control." "What about the plan? The company? Everything we've been working towards?" "All of that remains. We're still partners in this dance of deception. But behind closed doors—" He traced her cheekbone with his fingertips. "Behind closed doors, we could be real. No masks, no pretense, just us." The offer was tempting. More than tempting. It was everything Delilah hadn't allowed herself to want. But doubt nagged at her. And when Camilla makes her move, when Mitchell's plans come to light, can we separate our personal feelings from the game we have to play? Magnus's expression turned serious. "That's what makes it interesting, doesn't it? The challenge of balancing what we feel with what we must do. I'm not asking for naive romance, Delilah. I'm asking for partnership in its truest form. Complete trust, complete honesty, but only between us." "A private truth behind a public lie?" "Exactly." He smiled, and it transformed his face. "We're already expert performers. Why not give ourselves something real to protect?" Delilah took a deep breath, aware she was standing on the edge of something that would change everything. "If we do this, if we let ourselves feel what's growing between us, there's no going back." "I don't want to go back." Magnus pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers. "I want to go forward with you. Let tomorrow bring whatever challenges it will. Tonight, just be with me. Be real with me." In answer, Delilah kissed him, pouring into it all the complicated emotions she'd been struggling to contain. His response was immediate and passionate, his arms tightening around her as though she might disappear if he let go. When they separated this time, both knew everything had changed. The game they were playing had just become infinitely more complex, but also infinitely more rewarding. They had found something neither had expected in this marriage of convenience, a chance at real love, hidden behind their carefully maintained facade. As Magnus led her up to his private quarters, Delilah realized that this was perhaps the most dangerous game of all. Not the corporate intrigue, not the family betrayals, but the risk of genuine feeling in a world built on deception. Yet as his fingers laced with hers, she couldn't bring herself to regret a single step that had led her here. The masks were off. The truth laid bare between them. Tomorrow they would return to their performance, but tonight belonged to them alone. Two people who had found authenticity in the midst of artifice and love in the heart of deception. Chapter 8. Hearts in Turmoil. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Magnus's private suite, painting golden patterns across rumpled silk sheets. Delilah woke slowly, consciousness returning in gentle waves. The warm weight of Magnus's arm around her waist was both foreign and oddly right, as though her body had been waiting for this without her knowledge. "You're thinking too loud," Magnus murmured against her neck, his voice rough with sleep. Gone was any trace of his public persona. This was purely him, unguarded and real. "Sorry," she whispered, turning in his arms to face him. The morning light caught the silver threading through his dark hair at the temples, softening his usually sharp features. "This is just complicated?" His blue eyes opened fully, studying her face. "Do you regret it?" "No," she answered honestly, "but I'm trying to figure out how this works now. In an hour, we have to go back to our roles. You'll be the lovable simpleton, and I'll be the devoted wife managing her challenged husband. How do we reconcile that with this?" Magnus traced her cheekbone with his thumb, his touch impossibly gentle. "By remembering that this is our truth. Everything else is just a performance." A buzz from his secure phone interrupted the moment. Magnus's expression hardened as he read the message. The tender lover disappearing behind the calculating businessman. "Mitchell's making his move earlier than expected," he said, sitting up. "He's called an emergency board meeting for this afternoon. Apparently, he has concerns about the company's direction under current management." Delilah propped herself up on one elbow, mind already racing with implications. He wouldn't move without believing he has the upper hand. Has something changed? Yes. Magnus handed her the phone, showing her a series of photos. They showed Camilla entering a high-end Monaco hotel, looking exactly as polished and ambitious as Delilah remembered. But it was the man accompanying her that caught Delilah's attention, tall, distinguished, with greying hair at his temples. "That's not Mitchell," she said, frowning. "No, that's Charles Winston, CEO of our biggest competitor." Magnus's smile was grim. "Your sister's been busy. She's not just working with Mitchell. She's helping orchestrate a hostile takeover." The implications hit Delilah like a physical blow. "She's selling inside information about our family to help Winston's bid. Information that's now months out of date, thanks to you." Magnus brushed a kiss against her bare shoulder before rising. She doesn't know that her intelligence about the simple heir and his management by proxy arrangement is worthless. Mitchell's about to walk into that board meeting thinking he has leverage he doesn't actually possess. Delilah watched him move around the room, appreciating both his strategic mind and his physical presence. "What's our play?" The possessive plural wasn't lost on Magnus. His smile turned predatory. "First, we maintain our routine. You'll accompany me to the office as usual, the devoted wife making sure her challenged husband doesn't get overwhelmed by the meeting. Then, when Mitchell makes his move, we destroy him?" "No." Magnus paused in knotting his tie, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "We give him exactly what he wants, just not in the way he expects. Get dressed, darling. The game is about to become very interesting." An hour later, they arrived at Soren Industries' Manhattan headquarters. Magnus had transformed completely into his public persona, complete with slightly rumpled suit and vacant expression. Delilah led him through the lobby with practiced patience, nodding sympathetically at the pitying looks from employees. In the private elevator to the executive floor, Magnus squeezed her hand. "Ready?" She squeezed back. "Always." The boardroom was already full when they arrived. Mitchell sat at the far end of the table, radiating false concern as Magnus shuffled to his seat, accidentally knocking over a water glass in the process. "So sorry," he said loudly, his voice childlike. "Pretty. Water makes patterns." Delilah dabbed at the spill with practiced efficiency. "It's all right, dear. Why don't you use your special cup instead?" She produced a covered plastic cup with a straw, earning sympathetic smiles from several board members. Mitchell cleared his throat. "Mrs. Soren, while we appreciate your dedication, this meeting is for board members only. Confidential matters, you understand." "Oh, but Magnus gets anxious without me," she replied, letting worry colour her tone. "Perhaps I could just sit quietly in the corner. I promise not to interfere." "Actually," Henrik Soren interrupted smoothly, "I believe having Mrs. Soren present might be beneficial, given the nature of today's discussion. Please, my dear, take a seat." Mitchell's confident smile flickered slightly. This wasn't part of his script. The meeting began with standard updates, quarterly projections, market analysis, subsidiary reports. Magnus alternated between playing with a rubber band and making inappropriate comments about the colours in various presentations. Delilah kept careful notes while maintaining her facade of gentle concern for her husband. Finally, Mitchell made his move. "I feel it's time we address the elephant in the room," he announced, sliding folders to each board member. "While we all admire the dedication of the Soren family, recent market analyses suggest that our current management structure may be inadequate for maintaining shareholder value." He went on to outline his concerns, each point carefully crafted to emphasize Magnus's limitations without appearing overtly hostile. The proposal was elegant in its simplicity: create an executive committee to support Magnus, effectively transferring control while maintaining the appearance of family leadership. "And of course," Mitchell concluded smoothly, "we have the full support of Winston Enterprises in this transition. They've indicated their willingness to acquire a significant stake in Soren Industries, providing stability during this period of change." The trap was perfectly laid, or so Mitchell thought. He couldn't see Magnus's sharp intelligence behind the vacant smile, couldn't know that every word was being carefully weighed and measured. "Pretty numbers," Magnus said suddenly, pointing at the proposal with childlike enthusiasm, "like butterflies dancing." Mitchell's smile became strained. "Yes, well, the figures do paint a clear picture of the need for change." "Change is scary," Magnus announced, his voice trembling slightly. "But Daddy says sometimes scary things are good things, like when I had to learn to tie my shoes." Several board members shifted uncomfortably. This was exactly the sort of display Mitchell had hoped for, proof of Magnus's incompetence. But then Magnus knocked his special cup over, sending water cascading across the proposal documents. In the ensuing chaos of cleaning up, no one noticed him pressing a small button under the table. The boardroom doors opened, admitting a team of SEC agents, led by a stern-faced woman in a charcoal suit. "James Mitchell," she announced crisply. "We have some questions about your recent communications with Winston Enterprises, particularly regarding the sharing of confidential information and potential stock manipulation." The colour drained from Mitchell's face as he realized his carefully constructed plan was crumbling. But the final blow came from Magnus himself, who suddenly sat straighter, all trace of vacancy gone from his expression. "I believe," he said, his voice sharp and cultured, "you'll find everything you need in the files my security team has compiled, including, Mr. Mitchell, transcripts of your meetings with my sister-in-law in Monaco." The boardroom erupted in chaos. Mitchell lunged for the door, but was intercepted by security. Board members shouted questions and accusations, and through it all, Magnus sat calmly, holding Delilah's hand under the table, their fingers intertwined in private triumph. Later, in the sanctuary of their home, they celebrated with champagne in the garden. "Mitchell's finished," Magnus announced, satisfaction evident in his voice. "The SEC has enough evidence to bury him, and the board is falling all over themselves to reaffirm their loyalty now that they know the truth." "And Camilla?" Delilah asked softly. Magnus pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "The Monaco authorities are very interested in her role in this corporate espionage. She'll find her options severely limited in the coming weeks." "I should feel worse about this," Delilah admitted. "She's my sister." "She's a woman who would have destroyed your family without hesitation," Magnus corrected gently. "You gave her a chance at redemption when you took her place. She chose to double down on betrayal instead." Delilah turned in his arms, studying his face in the fading light. "What happens now?" "Now?" His smile was both tender and predatory. "Now we begin phase 2. The board knows I'm fully competent, but the public story will be that your loving care and dedication have helped me make remarkable progress in my recovery. Over the next few months, I'll slowly improve until I can gradually resume more public control of the company." "And us?" Magnus's expression softened. "That's the simplest part of all. We continue being exactly what we are. Partners in every sense of the word. The world can believe whatever it wants about our marriage, but we'll know the truth." As the sun set over Manhattan, casting long shadows across the garden, Delilah realized that their greatest deception had somehow led to their deepest truth. In pretending to be something they weren't, they had discovered who they really were. Together. The game would continue, the masks would stay in place when needed, but behind closed doors they had found something real, something worth protecting, something worth fighting for. Chapter 9. Sisters Return. The headlines in the New York Times business section told the story of a miracle. Soren heir shows remarkable recovery under new wife's care. The Wall Street Journal followed with "Love Conquers All, the remarkable rehabilitation of Magnus Soren." Even the tabloids got in on the narrative. Beauty and the Brilliant, how love healed a billionaire's brain. Delilah sat in their private breakfast nook, spreading the papers across the table while Magnus read the coverage on his tablet. "They're certainly running with the story," she observed, sipping her coffee. "People love a good redemption tale," Magnus replied, his eyes scanning the articles. "A damaged man brought back to his former glory by the power of love. It's practically a fairy tale. The PR team couldn't have scripted it better if they tried." The past month had seen Magnus's careful recovery play out exactly as planned. In public appearances, he gradually showed signs of improvement, speaking more clearly, handling complex tasks with increasing confidence, demonstrating flashes of his old business acumen. The transformation was attributed to Delilah's unwavering devotion and innovative therapy approaches, making her as much a star of the story as Magnus himself. "Your father called," Delilah mentioned, reaching for a croissant. "He wants us to do an exclusive interview with Forbes. They're featuring you in their Comeback Kings series." Magnus's expression darkened slightly. "Did he mention anything about our other situation?" The other situation was Camilla. After the SEC investigation into Mitchell had gone public, she had vanished from Monaco, her trail going cold somewhere in South America. Henrik's sources had been tracking her movements, waiting for her next move. Nothing specific, but Delilah was interrupted by her secure phone buzzing. The message made her blood run cold. "She's back." Magnus was at her side instantly, reading over her shoulder. The message contained a single photo, Camilla, stepping out of a town car in front of their parents' Manhattan residence, looking every inch the prodigal daughter returned. "Well," Magnus said softly, "this should be interesting." They arrived at the Black family home an hour later, their entrance perfectly choreographed. Magnus still played slightly subdued. His public recovery wasn't complete enough for him to appear fully restored, but the vacancy was gone from his eyes, replaced by subtle sharpness that he no longer had to completely hide. Camilla was holding court in the formal living room, their parents hanging on her every word as she spun tales of her spiritual journey through Europe and South America. She faltered mid-sentence when she saw them, her perfectly made-up face going slack with shock. "Magnus," she breathed, taking in his transformed appearance. You're improving day by day," he replied, his voice carefully modulated to show just a hint of his former hesitation. "Thanks to your sister's dedicated care." Delilah watched the calculations race across Camilla's face as she processed this new development. Her sister had always been quick to adapt, to find angles that worked to her advantage, but for once she seemed genuinely blindsided. "Delilah!" Camilla recovered enough to stand, arms outstretched for an embrace. "My dear sister, I have so much to apologize for." The hug was like embracing a beautiful statue, all cold marble and rigid poses. Delilah returned it briefly before stepping back to Magnus's side, his hand finding hers in a gesture that wasn't entirely for show. "We've been so worried," Eleanor Black gushed, dabbing at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. "When you disappeared." "I needed to find myself," Camilla interrupted smoothly. "After breaking off the engagement, I was lost, confused. I traveled, meditated, did some soul-searching." She turned her million-dollar smile on Magnus. "And now I see everything worked out exactly as it was meant to. You and Delilah. It's like fate." Magnus's answering smile held just a hint of the predator beneath. "Indeed it is. Though I'm curious about your time in Monaco. The meditation centers there must be extraordinary." A flicker of unease crossed Camilla's face, quickly masked. "Oh, I wasn't in Monaco. You must be thinking of someone else." "Must be," Magnus agreed amiably. "My memory still plays tricks sometimes, though it's getting better every day." The afternoon unfolded like an elaborate dance, with Camilla trying to maintain her narrative of spiritual awakening while probing for information about Magnus's condition and the company's status. Every question was met with carefully crafted responses that revealed nothing while implying everything. "I've been reading about your recovery," Camilla mentioned over tea. "The medical community must be fascinated." "They are," Delilah answered before Magnus could, "though they've all signed rather extensive confidentiality agreements. Patient privacy, you understand." The warning was clear. There would be no medical records for Camilla to acquire, no proof of Magnus's previous condition or current status. As they prepared to leave, Camilla pulled Delilah aside in the foyer. "Sister dear, I was hoping we could have lunch tomorrow, just us girls. I have so much to tell you." Delilah met her sister's eyes, seeing the familiar calculation there. "Of course," she agreed. "The plaza at 1? We can catch up properly." In the car heading home, Magnus waited until they were well away from the house before speaking. "She's planning something." "Obviously," Delilah agreed. "But what?" "Mitchell's finished. Winston Enterprises has withdrawn their takeover bid, and all her inside information is worthless now." "Which makes her dangerous." Magnus's expression was grim. "She has nothing left to lose." That evening, as they prepared for a charity gala, another carefully staged opportunity to showcase Magnus's ongoing recovery, Delilah received a text from an unknown number. Little sister, always so eager to play dress-up in other people's clothes. First my wedding dress, now my life. But some things don't fit as well as they appear. Lunch tomorrow will be illuminating. Delilah showed the message to Magnus, who read it with narrowing eyes. She's trying to rattle you. It's working, Delilah admitted. Camilla only gets this confident when she thinks she has an unbeatable hand. Magnus pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. Then it's a good thing she doesn't know she's playing against both of us now. Go to lunch tomorrow. Let her show her cards. Whatever she thinks she has, we'll handle it together. The gala that night was a triumph. Magnus played his role perfectly, intelligent but still occasionally hesitant, clearly improved, but not quite his old self. Delilah stayed close, offering subtle support that everyone interpreted as devotion. They were the perfect picture of a loving couple overcoming adversity together. But later, in the sanctuary of their bedroom, Delilah couldn't shake her unease. What if she knows something? About the original deception, about your condition being an act? Magnus pulled her into his arms, his public persona completely gone. Then we'll deal with it. Your sister isn't the only one who can play the long game, love. And she's about to learn that some bonds are stronger than blood. As Delilah drifted off to sleep, she couldn't help but wonder what tomorrow's lunch would bring. Camilla had always been brilliant at finding people's weak spots, at exploiting vulnerabilities for her own gain, but she had never faced an opponent like Magnus, nor dealt with a sister who had learned to play the game as well as she did. The stage was set for a showdown, and this time Delilah was ready. She wasn't the same woman who had stepped into her sister's place all those months ago. She had learned, grown, found strength she never knew she possessed, and found love she never expected. Whatever Camilla was planning, she would soon discover that some performances become reality, and some masks reveal more truth than the faces beneath them. Chapter 10. Betrayal's Bitter Taste. The Palm Court at the Plaza Hotel had always been Camilla's favorite stage for her performances. Delilah arrived precisely at 1 o'clock to find her sister already seated at the best table, looking exactly as she had during her reign as Manhattan's most ambitious socialite. Her Chanel suit was pristinely tailored, her sleek, dark hair arranged in elegant waves, her makeup perfect. "Darling," Camilla rose to air-kiss her cheeks, her smile razor-sharp. "You're looking well. Marriage clearly agrees with you." "Thank you," Delilah replied, taking her seat. "Though I doubt you arranged this lunch to discuss my marriage." Always so direct. Camilla signaled for the waiter. "Can't sisters simply catch up?" They ordered Camilla's usual champagne and the salad, Delilah's tea and sandwich, and maintained pleasant small talk until their drinks arrived. Only when they were truly alone did Camilla's mask slip slightly. "You've played the game beautifully," she began, stirring her champagne with a perfectly manicured finger. "The devoted wife, nursing her damaged husband back to health. It's quite the fairy tale. But we both know fairy tales aren't real, don't we?" Delilah met her sister's gaze steadily. "What exactly are you implying?" "Oh, not implying, darling. Stating," Camilla reached into her Hermes bag, withdrawing a slim folder. "You see, while everyone was watching Magnus's miraculous recovery, no one was watching his medical records from Switzerland. No one except me." She slid the folder across the table. Inside, Delilah found detailed reports from the private clinic where Magnus had recovered from his accident. "These prove nothing," she said, though her heart was racing. "Don't they?" Camilla's smile widened. "The doctors noted his full cognitive recovery before he left the clinic. There was never any lasting brain damage, which means his subsequent condition was an elaborate performance, a fraud perpetrated on shareholders, the board, and the entire business community." "That's quite an accusation." "It's quite a story," Camilla corrected. "The brilliant heir playing incompetent to expose his enemies. And then there's you, The substitute bride, complicit in the deception. How do you think the SEC would view this level of market manipulation? Delilah took a sip of tea, buying time to steady her nerves. What do you want, Camilla? Finally, we're getting to the point. Camilla leaned forward. I want what was originally mine. Magnus will divorce you, quietly, amicably, with a generous settlement to keep you comfortable. Then, after an appropriate interval, he and I will reconcile. The prodigal fiancé returns, drawn back by love and forgiveness. And if we refuse, then these records go public. Camilla's expression hardened. Magnus's career will be destroyed. The company will face federal investigation. You'll both be implicated in fraud. Your beloved husband will more likely end up in prison than the boardroom. Delilah studied her sister, seeing the absolute conviction in her eyes. Camilla truly believed she held all the cards, that her scheme was foolproof. It was almost sad how little she understood what she was really dealing with. You're right about one thing, Delilah said quietly. I have learned to play the game beautifully, but you seem to have forgotten who taught me. She reached into her own bag, withdrawing a second folder, this one considerably thicker. Would you like to know what this contains? Detailed records of your meetings with James Mitchell going back 8 months before my wedding. Proof that you orchestrated your own disappearance as part of a planned hostile takeover. Bank transfers showing payments from Winston Enterprises to offshore accounts in your name. Color drained from Camilla's face. That's impossible. Those records were destroyed. Were they? Or did Magnus's security team simply let you think they were? Delilah's smile matched her sister's earlier one. You're not the only one who can play a long game, Camilla. You're bluffing. Am I? Delilah opened the folder, sliding out several photographs. They showed Camilla in various locations. Monaco, Buenos Aires, São Paulo, always in the company of either Mitchell or Winston. While you were gathering ammunition against Magnus, we were gathering it against you. The difference is, our evidence doesn't just suggest corporate fraud. It proves international conspiracy, industrial espionage, and multiple violations of SEC regulations. Camilla's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her champagne. You wouldn't. I'm your sister. You stopped being my sister the moment you tried to destroy my husband. Delilah's voice was steel wrapped in silk. The moment you decided to use me as a pawn in your games. The moment you thought you could threaten my family. Your family? Camilla laughed bitterly. You're just his replacement for me, a convenient substitute who turned out to be useful. You really don't understand, do you? Delilah shook her head. Magnus and I may have started as a deception, but we've become something real. Something you could never comprehend because you've never cared about anything beyond your own ambition. She stood, gathering her things. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave New York. Those spiritual retreats you claim to visit, you're going to make them real. Find a nice, quiet place far away from here and stay there. If you ever try to contact us again, if you ever threaten my husband or our life together, these files go to every regulatory agency in the country. You can't do this to me, Camilla hissed, her composure finally cracking. I'm your older sister. I protected you. No, you used me. Just like you tried to use Magnus, just like you've used everyone in your life. But this time, you miscalculated. Delilah leaned down, her voice soft but deadly serious. You taught me how to play the game, Camilla. You just never expected me to become better at it than you. As Delilah walked away, she heard her sister call after her, This isn't over. She turned back one last time. Yes, it is. Goodbye, Camilla. Outside the plaza, Magnus was waiting in their car. One look at her face told him everything he needed to know. It's done? Delilah collapsed into his arms, finally letting the tension drain from her body. It's done, though she threatened to expose everything. Let her try. Magnus kissed her forehead. We've planned for every contingency. Your sister's time in the spotlight is over. As they drove home through the Manhattan streets, Delilah felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. She had just cut ties with her last blood relative, but in doing so, she had protected something far more precious, the genuine love and partnership she had found in what started as a deception. "Are you all right?" Magnus asked softly, his hand warm around hers. "Yes," she replied, surprising herself by meaning it. "It's just, I never thought I'd have to choose between my sister and my happiness. Sometimes the hardest choices prove who we really are." He lifted their joined hands, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "You proved you're stronger than anyone gave you credit for, including Camilla." Delilah leaned into his embrace, watching the city blur past the windows. The game wasn't over. It never really would be in their world, but she and Magnus had each other now, partners in every sense, facing whatever came next together. And that, she realized, was worth any price. Chapter 11. Love's True Test. The autumn wind whipped through Manhattan's concrete canyons, carrying with it the scent of change. From the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office at Sorin Industries, Magnus watched leaves dance past, his reflection overlaying the city sprawled below. 3 months had passed since Camilla's departure, and his official recovery was now complete. The business world had welcomed back one of its most brilliant minds, while society columns continued to praise the power of love and dedication that had brought him back from the brink. But success, Magnus was learning, brought its own kind of prison. "The merger projections for Q4, his assistant said, placing another stack of documents on his desk. "The board is particularly interested in your approach to the Davidson portfolio." Magnus nodded, his mind already calculating possibilities. Before his accident, he would have dismantled Davidson Industries without hesitation, stripped its assets, and discarded the remains. The old Magnus Sorin had been feared for exactly that kind of ruthless efficiency. "Sir?" his assistant prompted when he remained silent. "Should I tell them you'll proceed with the original strategy?" "No," Magnus said finally. "Schedule a full board meeting for tomorrow. It's time we had a serious discussion about the company's direction." That evening, he found Delilah in their private library, curled in her favorite leather armchair with a first edition of Jane Austen. The sight of her, completely herself, no pretense required, still made his heart skip. "The board wants the old Magnus back," he announced without preamble, loosening his tie. "The shark who never hesitated, never showed mercy, never let emotion cloud his judgment." Delilah marked her place carefully before looking up. "And what do you want?" It was the question he'd been wrestling with for weeks. "I spent so long playing a role, pretending to be simple, that I saw our world from a completely different perspective. I watched how people treat those they think are beneath them, saw the casual cruelty of corporate politics from the receiving end." He poured himself a whiskey, the crystal decanter catching the evening light. "I'm not sure I can be that person anymore." "Then don't be." Delilah rose, moving to stand beside him. "You've proven you're brilliant enough to succeed without destroying everything in your path. Why not forge a new way?" "Because the board follows strength," she interrupted. "Show them a different kind of power." Before he could respond, his secure phone buzzed. The message made him tense immediately. "What is it?" Delilah asked, recognizing his expression. "Camilla's surfaced in Geneva." He showed her the surveillance report. "Supposedly at a wellness retreat. But she's been meeting with Winston Enterprises' European division. My sources say she's gathering support from our overseas investors, playing on their concerns about the company's new, softer direction. She never could accept defeat gracefully. Delilah's voice held a mixture of sadness and steel. What's her angle? She's suggesting my recovery might be temporary. That trauma could cause a relapse at any time. Some board members are already whispering about the need for contingency plans. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. They had maintained their deception flawlessly for so long, only to face criticism now that they were finally being genuine. "So what do we do?" Delilah asked, though her tone suggested she already had ideas. Magnus's smile held a hint of his old predatory gleam. "We remind everyone why it's dangerous to underestimate us. But this time, we do it our way." They spent the next week orchestrating their response. Magnus introduced new corporate governance policies that impressed ethical investors while simultaneously strengthening his control. Delilah leveraged her connections in the charity world to generate positive press about Sorin Industries' renewed commitment to social responsibility. But opposition was mounting. Board members who had grown accustomed to dealing with Magnus's simple persona struggled to adapt to his new management style. Others questioned whether his recovery had changed him too fundamentally to lead effectively. "They're calling an extraordinary general meeting," Magnus announced one morning, reading from his tablet. "Officially to discuss strategic direction, unofficially." "They want to determine if you're fit to lead," Delilah finished. "Camilla's been busy. She's convinced some of them that my recovery might be temporary, that the trauma could return." He set the tablet aside, running a hand through his hair in frustration. The old Magnus would have crushed this rebellion instantly, destroyed anyone who questioned him. But that's not who you are anymore. Delilah moved behind him, massaging his tense shoulders. "And that's not a weakness, it's an evolution." He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "How did I get so lucky finding you?" "You didn't find me," she reminded him with a smile. "You orchestrated an elaborate deception to drive my sister away so I would take her place. Best manipulation I ever planned." His tone was light, but his eyes were serious, though it backfired spectacularly when I actually fell in love with you. The days leading up to the board meeting were intense. Magnus and Delilah worked late into each night, preparing their strategy. This wouldn't be like their previous performances. No more deception, no more masks. This time, they would show everyone exactly who they were. Henrik Sorin arrived 2 days before the meeting, his presence both support and complication. "The old guard is nervous," he told them over dinner in their private dining room. "They remember the Magnus who could make markets tremble. This new version, they're not sure what to make of him." "The old Magnus was effective," his son acknowledged, "but at what cost? How many lives did we destroy in the name of profit? How many communities devastated by our strategic restructuring?" Henrik studied him thoughtfully. "You really have changed." "We both have," Delilah interjected. "The question is, can Sorin Industries change too?" The morning of the meeting dawned clear and cold. Delilah helped Magnus choose his suit, not the perfectly tailored armor he used to wear, but something that projected both authority and authenticity. "Ready?" she asked, straightening his tie. "With you by my side?" "Always." He caught her hands, holding them against his chest. "Whatever happens in there, whatever they decide, I want you to know that choosing to be real with you was the best decision I ever made." The boardroom was packed when they arrived. Not just board members, but major shareholders and even select press had been invited. Camilla's influence was evident in the setup. This was meant to be a public referendum on Magnus's leadership. But when Magnus stood to address the room, something unexpected happened. Instead of defending himself or making promises, he told the truth, all of it. He explained his original deception, not as a manipulation, but as a desperate measure to protect what he'd built. He acknowledged how the experience had changed him, made him see business and power differently. The Magnus Soren you knew before was a mask, he concluded, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed room. The simple fool I played afterward was a mask, but the man standing before you now is real, a man who believes we can be both successful and ethical, both powerful and compassionate. He outlined his vision for Soren Industries, still aggressive, still profitable, but with a conscience. He showed how their new initiatives had actually increased shareholder value while creating positive social impact. Then he did something unprecedented. He invited Delilah to present their joint strategy for the future. She rose gracefully, every inch the powerful woman she had become. Her presentation was masterful, combining hard data with compelling vision. She showed how their charitable foundation had opened doors to new markets, how ethical business practices had attracted premium investors, how their new approach had positioned them ahead of emerging global trends. When they finished, silence fell over the boardroom. Then, from the back of the room, Henrik Soren stood. "My son has always been brilliant at strategy," he said slowly. "But never more so than when he learned that true strength isn't about destroying your opponents, it's about transforming them into allies." The vote that followed was unanimous. Not only was Magnus's position secured, but their new direction was fully endorsed. The press release went out within hours. Soren Industries was evolving, with Magnus and Delilah as joint leaders of a new era. That evening, they celebrated privately in their garden, watching the sunset paint Manhattan's skyline in shades of gold. "Was any of this part of your original plan?" Delilah asked, nestled in Magnus's embrace. "When you first decided to play the fool?" "Not even close," he chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest. "I planned for every contingency except the most important one, falling in love with someone who would make me want to be better than my masks." "And now, what's the plan?" Magnus turned her to face him, his expression more open than she'd ever seen it. "Now we write our own story. No more scripts, no more pretense. Just us, building something real together." As if to emphasize his point, a message arrived on both their phones simultaneously. Camilla had released a statement, officially retracting all claims against Soren Industries and announcing her retirement to a Tibetan monastery. "Did you arrange that?" Delilah asked, knowing her husband's penchant for elegant solutions. "Let's just say I helped her find her true calling," Magnus smiled. "Sometimes the best way to neutralize an opponent is to help them find peace." They stood together in their garden, no longer the fool and his caretaker, no longer the manipulator and the substitute, but partners in every sense. They had proven that authenticity could be its own kind of power, that vulnerability could be stronger than armor, that love could grow from deception into something real and lasting. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles to fight, but tonight, under the stars, they were simply Magnus and Delilah. Two people who had found their truth in the midst of lies, their strength in surrender, and their greatest victory in choosing to be real. Final chapter. Where Truth Lies Street, Patrick's Cathedral stood bathed in golden light, its Gothic spires reaching toward a perfect autumn sky. 1 year to the day after their first wedding, Magnus and Delilah Soren were about to rewrite their story, not with deception this time, but with unvarnished truth. The morning had begun with an earthquake in Manhattan's social circles. Camilla Black had done more than just retire to Tibet. She had appeared on live television, confessing everything: her original plot with Mitchell, her failed attempt at blackmail, and most surprisingly, her admiration for the sister who had surpassed her. "Delilah succeeded where I failed," she told the transfixed audience. "She took a marriage of convenience and turned it into something real. She took power and made it serve a purpose beyond ambition. In trying to destroy her, I only proved how much stronger she is than I ever was." In the bridal suite of the cathedral, Delilah watched the broadcast on her phone, tears streaming down her face. This wasn't part of Magnus's carefully orchestrated resolution. This was something else entirely. A knock at the door revealed Eleanor Black, her own eyes wet. "She called me this morning," her mother said softly. For the first time in her life, Camilla sounded at peace. Magnus did more than just neutralize her as a threat, Delilah realized. He gave her a chance at redemption. "He learned that from you, darling." Eleanor helped adjust her daughter's veil, not the one from her first wedding, but a new creation of delicate lace. "You showed him that true power lies in lifting people up, not crushing them." The cathedral filled with a different crowd than their first ceremony. Gone were the pitying looks and whispered speculations. Instead, they had gathered those who had stood by them through their transformation. Board members who had embraced their new vision, charity partners whose lives they'd changed, and a select few who knew their whole story and loved them anyway. Henrik Zoran sat in the front row, his eyes bright with pride as he watched his son stand tall at the altar, no trace of pretense in his bearing. Beside him sat Jonathan Black, finally understanding that his younger daughter had found her own kind of strength, different from but no less powerful than Camilla's ambition. But the real surprise came just before the ceremony began. Through the cathedral's side, Duper slipped a familiar figure, Camilla herself, dressed simply in cream-colored silk, her famous ambition replaced by something softer, more genuine. When Magnus and Delilah turned to begin their vows, he spoke first, his voice carrying clearly through the sacred space. "1 year ago, I stood here wearing a mask, playing a role I thought I needed to survive. I had spent 2 years pretending to be less than I was, thinking that deception was the only way to protect what I had built. But you, Delilah, saw through every defense, every pretense, until you found the truth of me. You didn't just play along with my deception, you transformed it into something real. Through you, I learned that true power isn't in what we hide, but in what we dare to reveal." He reached into his pocket, withdrawing not a ring, but a small key. "This opens a vault in our home. Inside, you'll find transfer documents making you full partner in everything I have, not just Soren Industries, but every company, every asset, every dream I've ever held. Because you've become more than my partner in deception or my savior in truth. You've become my heart's compass, pointing always toward what's real and right and worth fighting for." Delilah's voice trembled slightly as she responded, but her words rang with conviction. "I came to you as a substitute, stepping into a role that wasn't mine. I thought I was sacrificing my truth for my family's sake. Instead, I found myself. In pretending to be someone else, I discovered who I really am. You gave me the strength to stop living in my sister's shadow, to become not just a player in the game, but a woman who chooses to be authentic in a world of masks." She paused, one hand drifting to her stomach in a gesture that made Magnus's eyes widen. "And now you've given me something even more precious. A future where our child will never need to wear masks or play roles. A future where they'll know that the greatest power lies not in manipulation or control, but in the courage to be genuinely yourself." The revelation of her pregnancy sent a ripple through the cathedral, but Magnus's face showed only pure joy. He stepped forward, breaking protocol to kiss her then and there, earning chuckles and applause from the assembled guests. The reception was held in the grand ballroom of their home, transformed into an enchanted garden with thousands of twinkling lights and cascading flowers. But the real celebration took place later in Magnus's study, where 3 extraordinary things happened. First, Camilla approached them, not with schemes or demands, but with a gift, their father's antique fountain pen, the one he had used to sign every important document in his life. "For the next chapter of your story," she said simply, embracing her sister with genuine warmth before slipping away to return to her newfound path. Second, Henrik Soren announced his retirement, effectively immediately. "The company needs young blood, new vision," he declared, "and I can't think of two people better suited to lead it into the future." But the third moment was the most powerful. Magnus led Delilah to his private safe, revealing not just the company documents he'd promised, but something far more precious, a leather-bound journal filled with sketches he'd made throughout their journey together. The first drawings showed her as she'd been at their first wedding, uncertain but determined. Each subsequent page revealed her evolution, growing stronger, more confident, more genuinely herself. The final sketch, dated that morning, showed her as she was now, powerful, radiant, and unmistakably pregnant. "You saw me all along," she whispered, tracing the images with trembling fingers. "I saw you becoming yourself," he corrected softly, "just as you saw me becoming myself. Every mask we wore, every role we played, led us here, to this moment of absolute truth." Later that night, as their guests danced below, they stood on their bedroom balcony, looking out over the city they had learned to rule in their own way. Magnus's hand rested protectively over her stomach, where their future grew stronger each day. "Any regrets?" he asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Just one," she smiled. "That we can't tell the world our whole story. It would make an incredible novel." "Who would believe it?" he laughed. "The brilliant businessman playing the fool, the substitute bride becoming more perfect than the original, love growing from deception. Truth emerging from lies," she added, turning in his arms. "Power found in vulnerability. A baby conceived in authenticity after a marriage born of deception." Below them, Manhattan glittered like a sea of stars, while above, the real stars wheeled in their eternal dance. They stood between the two, no longer bound by society's expectations or their own carefully constructed masks. The game that had brought them together was over. The performance had ended. What remained was something far more precious. A love story written in truth, a partnership forged in authenticity, a future bright with possibilities they never could have imagined when they first stepped into their roles. Their child would be born into a world of power and privilege, but also one of honesty and love. They would teach them that the greatest strength lies not in wearing masks, but in the courage to be genuinely yourself. As the night deepened around them, Magnus and Delilah held each other, no longer the fool and his caretaker, no longer the manipulator and the substitute, but simply two people who had found their truth in the midst of lies, their strength in vulnerability, and their greatest love in the courage to be real. And somewhere in a Tibetan monastery, Camilla Black smiled, finally understanding that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what truly matters. Subscribe if liked. Something far more precious. A love story written in truth, a partnership forged in authenticity, a future bright with possibilities they never could have imagined when they first stepped into their roles. Their child would be born into a world of power and privilege, but also one of honesty and love. They would teach them that the greatest strength lies not in wearing masks, but in the courage to be genuinely yourself. As the night deepened around them, Magnus and Delilah held each other, no longer the fool and his caretaker, no longer the manipulator and the substitute, but simply two people who had found their truth in the midst of lies, their strength in vulnerability, and their greatest love in the courage to be real. And somewhere in a Tibetan monastery, Camilla Black smiled, finally understanding that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what truly matters. Subscribe if liked.